difficult boy.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons. Alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week, we take a look back in time to decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, we'll cover one and choose one for yourself. Please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, and our YouTube channel, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All of that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
So, Gene, this week I am very excited. It's a film that I have hyped up for a long time with you. It's about time that we did it. You know, we got to get a little fancy. We got to get to some of the films which are acclaimed and not just the smaller, wilder, or action-packed 80s and 90s films. So one of our commissioners, great support of the podcast, Jeff S., he wrote in, and this week's film is for him. He wanted us to follow a young Christian Bale through the turmoil of World War II-era Shanghai. It's going to be a journey, Gene. We're going to go from pampered and privileged to a gritty survival. It's going to be packed with epic visuals, soaring music, and a story of resilience, coming of age, and finding hope where it's seemingly impossible. So we're going to grab our aviator glasses, get our little trusty Silver Zero and our best golf shoes, Gene, because we're going to go back to 87 for Jeff, and we're going to review the Steven Spielberg classic, Empire of the Sun.
Jeff wrote in and said, "Hello, gentlemen. I previously commissioned A Few Good Men, and you played my response to your excellent review on a subsequent episode. You were too kind to compliment my podcast voice and Canadian politeness. This time around, I would like to commission Empire of the Sun. Why am I advocating for this one? One, it's based on the semi-autobiographical novel from J.G. Ballard, who wrote the novel Crash, which was turned into a movie. Two, Steven Spielberg is the director, with many critics saying this has not been properly recognized in his filmography. Three, basically Christian Bale's first role, and he is amazing at age 12. And hey, John Malkovich is in it. And finally, is nominated for 6 Academy Awards. But the real reason is the history it covers. It's 1941, and Japan has just attacked Pearl Harbor. This shows what happens to the expats in China as Japan ramps up its war effort. Granted, it is a dark coming-of-age story with a mediocre narrative, but the performances, backdrop, and cinematography are well worth it. I believe this film will become more important as time marches on as an explanation of Spielberg's journey and will provide great understanding of that theater of war. At its core is the question, where do we find our heroes? And that is fascinating. Cheers, Jeff S.
Yeah, I think Jeff is right. This is one of those films that, you know, a lot of times Spielberg, he did a lot of like historical dramas. This is the one. I don't know how much of this history I would have known if it wasn't for this film.
I definitely find myself more into Spielberg's, I would say, quote unquote, war movies than his supernatural, extraterrestrial, whatever you want to call it, films. I think this is his strong suit. And I was excited to see a type of story that I hadn't seen before. So thanks, Jeff. Empire of the Sun is a 1987 epic coming-of-age war film directed by Spielberg that tells the story of Jamie Jim Graham, played by Christian Bale, a young boy who goes from living with his family in Shanghai to becoming a prisoner of war in an internment camp operated by the Japanese during World War II. Spielberg was attracted to direct the film because of a personal connection to World War II topics and considers it to be his most profound work on the loss of innocence. The film received positive reviews with praise toward Bale's performance, the cinematography, and Spielberg's direction. However, the film was not initially a commercial success, earning only $22 million at the U.S. box office. Big D, I've seen Empire Strikes Back. I've seen Rising Sun. Prior to this commission, I had never seen The Last Emperor or Empire of the Sun. You talked it up a ton. And when we started preparing to do this episode, I saw the cast included a very young Christian Bale, as you mentioned, John Malkovich, Ben Stiller, and Joey Pants. So I was sold.
Man, this is, I was a little off on this one, Gene. Was the Mandela effect? Is that what they say, where you could swear it's a memory that you're holding near and dear? And I would have bet money that this came out in like the 90s, mid 90s. When I saw 87, I was like, holy shit, I was way off base at this point, because this is pre my Blockbuster days of the 90s. And that's where I thought I had seen it. And there is something that happens when you worked at a video store back in the day. This is like the Quentin Tarantino effect. We've seen all the interviews with him where he talked about the video store and his selection, like the employee selection that he had, and when people would come in and ask you for recommendations. This was a place where, like a teenager, their opinion mattered. We would get people there. Hey, do you have something, you're out of the big hit. Can you recommend something smaller? Is there something good? And people would value our thoughts. And like teenagers, and even sometimes now, you found yourself with this place of importance, you would start to think about this and take your opinion way too seriously. There were times at during this time where people would come up and be like, hey, have you seen Speed? And you'd be like, oh, Speed. No, you should be watching something else. You should be watching something like Miller's Crossing or something like impactful like Barton Fink. Have you seen that? Or La Femme Nikita? No, you don't want to see Alias. You want to see La Femme Nikita. So I think this movie was one of those. This is years after it had come out when I started to see it. And I think I put this in my little selection for my end cap when it was Big D's employee recommendations. So yeah, I think that was it. And it was, again, not a big film. You think Spielberg, this had to have at the time classified as a failure.
Would you say that you're withdrawing a recommendation of this film? Would you take it off of your Blockbuster wall?
Now, yes.
Yeah.
Now, back in the day, though, this was, because it is visually stunning. The music, the performances. As a whole, though, now that I've seen, again, when you hold this against some of other Spielberg's, historical dramas and some of his hits, he is the master of genre blockbuster. He's really diversified. But here, I almost could feel and hear him in my head as he's storyboarding this out. And he's trying to work through, how do you tell a story that everyone knows the ending? Everyone knows what's going on. It's a historical piece, but yet pull on those emotional strings. I could feel it throughout. And I don't know now, upon viewing it at 50 plus, that it all fit together as perfectly as my little Blockbuster employee customer service rep of the month thought it did.
Maybe you should have given a call to James Cameron. Figured that one out. Let's hit the trailer.
A desperate time. A world at war. A boy alone.
Amid Japan's invasion of China during World War II, Jamie Jim Graham is a British upper-middle-class schoolboy enjoying a privileged life in the Shanghai International Settlement. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan begins occupying the settlement. And as the Graham family evacuate the city, Jamie is separated from his parents and makes his way back to their house, assuming they will return. After a length of time alone and having eaten all the food, he ventures back into the city. So, Big D, you mentioned that this is very much a product of the 80s, and though it's done masterfully, it does feel a bit aged. We've watched together a lot of 80s and 90s movies that like to set up the story with a little opening crawl or prologue. This is very popular, particularly like in the middle to late 80s. But normally what we get is some words on the screen, and it's set to music. There might be a little graphic treatment in the background or a static image, and they leave the reading to us. And after watching Empire of the Sun, I got to say thank you to Steven Spielberg, because to my recollection, this is like the first dude who gave us a nice little treat. They had the events leading up to the film explained in a nice, clear voice to go with the text. It was lovely. I was just like, oh, thanks for reading that for me. I didn't really want to read it myself. It was like, they're like, hey, it's going to be a 2.5 hour ride. Let's ease you into things.
Yeah, I think they needed that, because even like today, I mentioned that I don't know how many people knew the history. This wasn't like one of those like big points in history where people were like clamoring, let's put this up on the big screen. So you needed to explain it. It was nice. It put us at the time.
But why do you suppose other movies don't do this? Why don't they read it for us? What the fuck?
I don't. Maybe they would think it's like, it would be lazy, or it's hand holding, or it's talking down to the audience. I don't know.
I'm paying money. It takes the same amount of time whether you have a voiceover or not. Just read the damn thing.
God, there was a time when they used to hand out like leaflets before you went into the films that would explain what you were going to see. It wasn't it Apocalypse Now that described like the production, and it went into the history. And yes, handhold us, Gene. Make it easier for us. And I did not remember how this film would unfold. I remembered the basic plot, not so much the historical facts without the intro text. But we're going to have to talk about the point of view of this film, because I did not remember that it is going to be from Jim's perspective as a child. I remembered that Empire of the Sun was going to be a traditional third-person objective narrative. It was going to tell the story of Jim getting separated, Jim getting lost, he's in the camps, the whole thing. I never realized that it was going to be seen through the lens. I'm not sure that it happened, or that it happened this way, or it's like a child telling us, because you're seeing the life of Jim and his parents. If it is through the lens of Jim, the spoiled child, the life he's living, he wouldn't have the perspective on his life and the people around him. They would have been more innocent. They would have been more likable. But everybody in his circle, I find them insufferable. I don't enjoy their presence. I'm not feeling bad for young Jim as he's being traumatized. I think he kind of deserves it. So it has to be that the movie is trying to tell us this portion of the film as an objective third person, and then later it becomes a very different, like childhood imagination. Oh, the wonder of the camps and my bicycle rides through, Shanghai. But the beginning here, I don't know so much.
Listeners, if you haven't seen this movie before, this isn't like a Ron Howard movie, or like this isn't like a Stand By Me where we're getting like the narrator like tapping away at his keyboard. Okay. It does dabble in a child's perspective. It also does dabble in a rather adult perspective. But regardless of that, I'm willing to forgive it, because this gives us a new view into the war, right? And I appreciated that. At this point, I mean, God, Big D, how many World War II movies have we seen? And we've seen it from the perspective of Americans at Normandy countless times in film and video games, Europeans enduring the Nazi onslaught. We've seen that. Japanese in the Pacific with a lot of the work that like Clint Eastwood did. But I didn't even know prior to watching this movie that there were even privileged Brits living in China as Japan invaded. And so I don't know how much of this is real or not, because I don't really know anything about their experience, but it was eye-opening to see that that any of this happened.
He is the worst insufferable little brat. He's doing all the shit that you want to strangle a kid. He's driving his bicycle around with a model plane, and all the staff that are on their little estate are chasing him around. And he's burning like a plane and making them chase it. And these poor workers, these poor Chinese workers, are cutting the grass with large like shears, manually cutting the fucking grass. And they're chasing Jim around. And Jim is raiding their stacked refrigerator, Gene. That was a beautiful refrigerator. It had like biscuits and cake and dairy products and all kinds of desserts. And the woman's like, hey, your mother wouldn't be happy. You're the help. You're supposed to do what I say. I'm like, fuck you, Jim. I know what's going to happen to you soon, and I'm not feeling bad for you. And these poor workers, they're having to smile and laugh at this kid and his parents as they're dressed in their Halloween costumes, driving through the city, through the riots, through the poverty, dressed in all of these outlandish outfits. You're not sympathetic. And I mean, if this is the story from Jim, he's got some insight into the world he's living well beyond his age as a 12-year-old boy.
But I mean, that's all intentional. You're supposed to be enraged, and the ridiculousness, the audacity of those costumes going through the riots in the streets. I mean, I watched Empire of the Sun the night before the presidential election, and then I watched it again the night after the election. There was one part that really stood out. It's exactly what you talked about. There was this shift in the film from normal life to like sort of tension. You start to hear things on the radio. Dad's burning some documents in the fireplace. People are starting to act a little off, you know, and then it goes into full blown horror. And it doesn't just happen all at once. Like there are these warning signs, but people are also carrying on with everyday habits. It's something that we thankfully as Americans have not really been exposed to. But you start to see there's bigger crowds every time they go out in the streets. The temperature is sort of rising. People are getting a little wilder, but they're still taking their fancy car to the fancy party while the poor are getting restless, right? And they see the Japanese planes going over in the sky, but you still got to go to school that day. And it really got me thinking, Big D, about life right now. And this is not my conjecture. This is not me overreacting. This is facts, okay? This is what is being promised to us by the incoming president, right? The largest scale deportation operation in American history is scheduled to start in January 2025. If you think I'm being alarmist, again, if you listen to this podcast, this is not my opinion. This is a promise from the incoming president of the United States that we are going to have the largest scale deportation operation in American history in January. We know that government is going to change from professionals to partisans. Again, this is not criticism of the incoming president. Mm-hmm. This is me saying what the plan is, okay? And we know that retribution, political retribution, is a top line agenda item. And knowing all of that, I'm still like, what the fuck do I do? Do I take all of my money out of the stock market? Do I sell my homes and liquidate my assets? Do I stop spending because tariffs are going to kick in and shit's going to get really expensive? Do I leave the country? Or, Big D, do I make plans for Thanksgiving and Christmas and Mardi Gras?
It's what people want. It's what people voted for. It's what can I do? So my take is I'm going to go about my day and I'm going to just watch it all go.
But you're the guy in the limo in the Halloween costume going to the party.
No.
You're like, it's all going to happen, but I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing.
No, I'm going to not go to the party and drive through. I might put my lawn chair on my roof and just watch whatever's going to happen, but it's going to be fucking wild.
Yeah, and you're like in the eye of the storm, man. You're in Florida.
No, this is the Third Reich. I'm in the safe. I'm in the homeland. Are you kidding me?
Eagle's nest.
I'm good. I'm more worried about going home on Thanksgiving and having to deal with my father because whatever. It's again. I can't. I'm not upset. It was what can I do? I realize I am in the minority, and I realize that sometimes people want things without thinking about what they're going to get. And I think people should Google how tariffs work and realize that they're not going to lower your price. But whatever, man. You know what, Gene? Fuck it. Let's have a Halloween party. Let's get in the limos. Let's go fucking drive around the house on our bicycles, and let's eat all the sweets and candy in the fridge before it fucking stops working.
So essentially, this is my point, listeners, is that as it seems totally ridiculous for these people to behaving this way as China is being essentially overrun, as Shanghai is being overrun by the Japanese, that's what normal people do. Get on with life, because uprooting yourself and your family. I mean, I thought about it. I'm like, let's say I want to leave the country. Is my mom going to go with me? No.
Mm-mm.
Are my aunts going to go with me? No. Can I take my 4 dogs to, I don't know, France? No, I can't. They're not going to let me. So it's like you're rooted in the place that you are. And sometimes that means that world events are going to shake your life. There is no right way to behave, I don't think.
Sometimes the help won't be too nice to you when you fucking turn on them. So maybe some people need to get a good old Jim slap.
Yeah. Hungry, Jim tries surrendering to Japanese soldiers who ignore him. After being chased by a street urchin, he is taken in by 2 American expats and hustlers, Basie and Frank. Unable to sell Jamie, they intend to abandon him in the streets, but he offers to lead them to his neighborhood to loot the empty houses there. Jim is surprised to see lights on in his family home and thinks his parents have returned, only to discover that the house is occupied by Japanese troops. The 3 are taken prisoner, transported to the Civilian Assembly Center in Shanghai for processing, and sent to an internment camp in Suzhou.
What were they trying to sell him for? What was the purpose? You know, they're checking his teeth. He's a bit smaller. I wasn't quite sure why they were selling him, if it was for slavery or to work, or maybe it was as maybe something more nefarious, something sexual. I don't know, but I guess, times were tough, and I guess you couldn't sell the little British boy and whatever. It's enough, though, that Jim should feel terror. At this point, Gene, maybe you're making... Now, everything that I talk about here, I'm going to think about myself.
Yeah.
That I'm young Jim on the streets of Shanghai here in Orlando. But the invasion's begun. Jim cannot follow simple instructions. Hold your mother's hand, Jim. No, Jim's flying around with his little plane. Jim's not taking this shit serious. It's Shanghai. It's a big city. This should feel like a horror movie, especially if it's from Jim's perspective. This is Jim's semi-biographical story. He should be remembering the isolation. He's fearing for his life. He's fighting to get back to his parents, to this sea of endless people. The Chinese soldiers are marching in. Then you got that one little kid who's out there English boy, who's chasing him around. Does it feel like terror, Gene? No. It feels like the opening scene in Temple of Doom, when Willie and Indy's poisoned, and then Short Round comes with the car, and I start hearing in my head, Gene, anything goes. And I'm thinking of a dance number, because they're running out in the street and Jim is jumping from rickshaw to rickshaw back and forth. The people in it are like, ha, what are you doing? People are laughing. People are having a good time. Then the Japanese soldiers, there's snipers up on the roof. A full gun battle breaks out in the street. And Jim is like a kid who's roller skating for the first time. He's, whoa, to the left, whoa, to the right. People are getting shot around him. This is not a serious, horrible moment in Jim's life. Then Jim escapes from that local tough kid who's going to say, hey, English boy, come here. He runs out in the street, turns as a truck comes, screeches, and I'm hearing Looney Tunes, zoinks, and the truck stops an inch from his face, and now he's met Basie and the boys. This is not the right tone for this part of the film.
Considering the film was told from the perspective of a child, as you said, who survived this ordeal, I'm going to go ahead and accept this perspective on events, strange as it is. Jim has not been exposed to war. He's not been exposed to death. He has not even been exposed to the streets. And so his reaction, as you said, roller skating around in the middle of a gun battle, maybe that's what it was, because I don't know how I would react. I've never been in combat. This might be the way. But we shouldn't overlook the fact that this movie is, as Jeff said, really beautiful. And sometimes in doing our Shatley duties, we don't take the time to state the obvious, that movies are exceptionally gorgeous. I'm not going to say that the costuming and the sets are perfect. Big D. As you said, this does have a little bit of an Indiana Jones feel to it. Everyone looks like Hollywood grimy. You can tell it's makeup, and they're like artfully roughed up in their clothing, right?
Yeah.
Jim's little outfit that he's got on at the camp, that shit's getting stolen in like 5 minutes. Leather jacket, oh, that's a high value item. Nobody's gonna let him have that thing. But some of these shots, despite the silliness and the Hollywoodness of it, they are magnificent. Okay, when Jim walks up to that Japanese Zero and touches it for the first time, and he's kind of rubbing his hands and his head on it, and there's the welding sparks in the background and the silhouettes of the Japanese pilots. I'm not saying that it's accurate. I'm not saying that it's not over the top. What I am saying is it is art. It is pretty. It is meant to evoke a feeling, and it is using the camera in a very intelligent way.
What a shock, Gene. Spielberg knows how to frame a shot.
Yeah.
Of course he does. One of the fucking things he does the best. It is beautiful, Gene. Yes, it's a wallpaper. It's a fucking screensaver on my computer. But it is saccharine sweet. I can hear Spielberg. He's storyboarding it out there. He's like, this is what's going to happen now. He's like, hey, Jim's going to see his dream. It's the plane. It's there in front. There's sparks flying. And the guard comes up. The guard sees this little boy running up to a plane, getting ready to go out on a sortie. He loads around. Look, this kid could be a terrorist. You don't know what this boy is going to do. Is he going to sabotage the plane? But then all of a sudden, the soldier stops and he looks, and Jim turns and he salutes the 3 fucking Zero pilots coming out there. And we get this soaring music, Gene. It's like, it's this saccharine sweet. They're trying to shove it. Oh, if it's from Jim's memory, that's how Jim saw it, right?
Right.
It was a moment where the sparks, and it's there. It's emotional. He's remembering it, but no, there's no way this shit happened. He didn't fucking salute these pilots who saluted him back, and then the guard's like, "Look at that little kid. That's so cute." And I'm hearing Spielberg like, "Hey, we need more music. Make it soar. Make it soar." We're making pictures here. We gotta make people emotional.
It is now 1945, nearing the end of the Pacific War and World War II. Despite the terror and poor living conditions of the camp, Jim survives by establishing a trading network, which even involves the camp's commander, Sergeant Nagata. Dr. Rollins, the camp's British doctor, becomes a father figure and teacher to Jim. One night after a bombing raid, Nagata orders the destruction of the prisoners' infirmary as a reprisal, but he stops when Jim begs forgiveness. Through the barbed wire fencing, Jim befriends a Japanese teenager who is a trainee pilot.
Okay, so I've come off of now complaining about anything goes and the shenanigans going on in the streets of Shanghai, and I can't believe I'm going to say this. I wanted some voiceover narration of Jim. Maybe he's talking about this as an adult. He's describing the experience so that it explains to me why the tone of the scenes are very different. We've got his childhood memory of the sparks and the plane and saluting the pilots and this and that. And then we go into here some actual real world. I think it's horror. I think there is some of the film which does depict the life in the camps fairly accurately. But when it goes into that comical, like kids adventure, and the music, I swear they stole from the Goonies. There's one like that dun 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 where the Goonies are like off on their bikes. That's Jim's shenanigans in some parts of the movies. And the tone of it, it's so jarring and comical to when we get to the real parts with death and despair, like this first camp they go to where they're kept indoors and there's some disease that's going around and people who are drinking the water, people are dying left and right, people are stealing clothes off of the deceased. And the best part, my laugh out loud moment, Gene, if there was one in this film, these husband and wife, British husband and wife who have 2 children, the wife has died and they're trying to steal the boots off of him. The kids are sitting there crying. And Jim is like, Basie, stop, leave her alone. I don't want the shoes. And he looks at the kids. He goes, it's okay, kid. She's with God now. And I just fucking busted out laughing. But the rest of the experience in that camp is pretty bad. They're having to steal food. They're having to take the plates from the dead It's horrible. It's really, really bad. But then, Gene, we immediately jump forward to 1945. And in this time jump, it goes right into he's this little scamp. He's running around to the Goonie music throughout the camp, and he's running around and he's trading cabbage and he's interacting with all the colorful different expats and Brits who are out there who are playing golf, or the Americans are throwing around the baseball. You got a handful of people who are playing the harmonica. You got the kids playing fucking shooting marbles. He's making friends. Yeah, some people are doing arts and crafts. They're ironing clothes. Is this a fucking camp, Gene? Is this what is actually going on in camp? Is this like a resort, or is this the child's vision of what was actually going on in this camp?
Having never been to a Japanese internment camp in mainland China during World War II, I don't know. But I did get a sort of Hogan's Heroes vibe from the whole thing. I mean, you could have basically swapped out any of these characters for Hogan's Heroes. And when we're first introduced to labor camp, I was like, oh, shit.
Fuck
like
yes.
There's this mountain of people. They're slaving away. You get off the truck and immediately you get a stone. You carry that fucking stone and they're going to beat the shit out of you. I'm like, wow, this movie's getting dark real fast. And then after that, there seems to be very little labor in this labor camp. Like, I don't see anybody working after that. And again, maybe that was the truth of things. Like, maybe they got the runway built and then like, well, fuck, there's nothing else to do. Eat some rice with some weevils in it and chill for the next couple of years.
He's running around. He's helping the doctor. He's playing with the harmonica. He's like trading magazines. There seems to be a wealth of contraband within this camp. The Japanese are either the kindest guards.
Definitely not rapey or murderous.
No, it doesn't seem
infamously kind.
No, it doesn't seem like anybody is worse for the wear, other than maybe like some kind of viruses or sicknesses that are going around naturally. But they're very tolerant. Everyone seems to, like, if you have a hobby, Gene, you could take up your hobby. You could paint. You could grow fucking tomatoes, Gene, and have it be the British tomatoes. And, you know, the Americans, they're having fun in their bunks. It's a very different take. This is not the man who shot Schindler's List. It's a little different tone in these camps.
Big D, we talked earlier about how Jim just reacted to everything going around sort of ignorant and aloof way. He was not really aware of the reality of the world, not prepared for any of it. We then see him interacting with Basie, who certainly does not have his best interest in mind. And that was the other funny thing, is I thought from all the photos, you know, you see the promo photos for this movie, you see John Malkovich kind of got his arms on the shoulders of a young Christian Bale. I'm like, oh, that's going to be like the guy that protects him and guides him through life. Jim's relationship with Basie had me ask myself, like, who is the better dad, right? Because Jim's biological parents, they provide for him. He's getting his education. He's learning to sing in the choir, Welsh songs. He's insulated from the world around him. He's kept in the dark about world events, right? He's living a child's life. He doesn't care about the Chinese. He doesn't care about the Japanese. He doesn't care about the Americans. He's agnostic. You know, he just likes brave soldiers. He likes airplanes. And I understand his parents' logic. This is not a criticism of Jim's parents, because it is your job as a parent to protect your child, to provide for your child, to give them the best education and lifestyle you can afford. So I don't fault them. Basie, on the other hand, John Malkovich, he puts Jim in like the most dangerous situations. Like, hey, go crawl under that fence line where they have like machine guns trained and they're patrolling where the Japanese aircraft are. Go catch us a pheasant if you want to be in the dorms with us. And he's like, all right, I got it. Basie, I'm going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. He exploits Jim in a ton of different ways, but that helps Jim grow. It helps him survive. I'm a firm believer that Jim would not have survived this ordeal without Basie's lessons, even though the lessons were not meant to make him stronger or better in any way. They were just experiences he lived through. But I want to pick your opinion as a father. Who's the better dad here? Jim's bio dad or Basie?
Well, let's clear. Let's start off with the fact that I don't think Basie is trying to be dad. Basie's relationship with Jim is sheerly transactional. Every step where he turns and is going to abandon Jim, my heart was like, no, don't leave him behind. And he's like, don't leave me. Let me come with you. And he's trying to fight to prove that he has worth. whether it's his knowledge of where wealthy houses are, or whether his father has money and can pay for him to be returned. It's sheerly transactional, and you can't hate Basie. Basie's auditioning for who can help him survive, and I don't blame him. In that situation, Basie's got to look out for himself. There's plenty of kids. You can't save everybody, and it's up to who's going to win. Is it going to be Ben Stiller as Dainty? That's who he's competing against. But the biological dad, he lost this comparison immediately. He is aware of what is going on. He's reading all of the confidential paper. So he has access to all of what the British government knows of what's going on. Troop placement. He knows that they're coming in, yet he is one of the few who has remained and positioned his wife and child in a very dangerous city in a dangerous time. So he has shown his priorities are not keeping them safe, and it is not duty. He doesn't mention, I've sworn to stay here and protect this installation. He's not protecting a bridge like Private Ryan. He is working for his business, his own business. He is choosing monetary wealth and protecting his factory and the risk of getting his kids out of Shanghai, which it seemed like 2/3 of the other British families are already gone. And this motherfucker's staying there, even though his son just ran over a hill into a large group of Chinese soldiers who did not look too happy to see him.
So Basie is your answer?
Yeah, he's not really a dad, but I just think the dad fucking does not come back from that. At the end of this, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like Rose, when Rose survives the Titanic and then she sees her ex-fiance and she just ignores him. I think Jim puts his head down and goes on and says, you know what, Dad, Mom, fuck you. Don't put your 12-year-old son in a revolutionary situation where the troops are marching through the streets and then say, Jimmy boy, come here and hold your mother's hand. No, that's not how it works, Dad. You don't forgive you for that.
One morning, the base is attacked by American aircraft. Jim climbs a nearby pagoda to have a better view of the action, and Dr. Rollins chases him to save him. Jim breaks down in tears, saying he cannot remember what his parents look like. As the Japanese leave the camp, Jim's trainee pilot friend goes through the ritual kamikaze preparation, but his aircraft engine sputters and dies. The camp prisoners march through the wilderness, where many die from fatigue, starvation, and disease. Arriving at a football stadium near Nantao, Jim recognizes his parents' Packard car. He spends the night there with Mrs. Victor, a fellow prisoner who dies shortly thereafter, and witnesses flashes from the atomic bombing of Nagasaki hundreds of miles away.
So Spielberg, this is not one of his biggest hits. You could say it was a failure, but he has mastered so many genres. He does E.T., Jaws, the big blockbuster hits, so that he can do these other films, which are like his passion project. And as he's gone on his career, and especially later on, he has shown that the historical films, that's what he wants to focus on. He wants to tell his story. And Empire of the Sun was the first. Then he did Amistad, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, Lincoln, Bridge of Spies, Munich. He did The Post. And he is renowned for his ability to tell history and tell the story of these famous figures in a way that brings them to life. And he is serving as a historian and educating people on what's going on when you see it played out on screen. But there's something in this film where it doesn't have that normal emotional component. He has the ability in E.T., when E.T. is saying goodbye, a really bad puppet, a really bad like animatronic alien who's saying, be good with his glowing face. And I want to cry, Gene. I can get emotions out of E.T. getting back on his ship and Elliot crying. This film is kind of missing that little component. There's something about it which is forced. It's artificial. There's a scene here where Jim's third parents, who we didn't even mention, the other British couple who are taking him under his wing, he's bunking up with them, and Jim is watching them have awkward camp sex. The wife she's malnourished. Her teeth are starting to fall out. The husband climbs on top of her. Jim is watching, and behind him, there's explosions and the sky is being lit up. And then later on with the American raid, it didn't look like an epic war film. It didn't feel emotional. There's a crescendo of violence in Jim's experience. What I saw was Wes Anderson when he did Rushmore, and they did the stage presentation of Heaven and Hell. And there was the raid in Vietnam. There were flamethrowers. There was explosions, miniature aircraft flying around. I don't know if it was intentionally really bad theatrical. Like it looks this one scene, and then at the end, that whole raid, and he's screaming up at the top, "They're beautiful, Cadillac of the sky," and he's running around. It seemed like it was missing that grounded where we felt the joy of the camp's liberation and Jim's survival. I didn't feel any of that. Did you feel like connected to this?
No, I was confused by a lot of the action scenes. But again, it came back to like the whole reliable narrator factor, right? Because at one point the pilot flies by and he sees Jim. He's like, "Hello," like waves at him. And then there's a guy with like a parachute. What happened to that guy? I don't really know. But the action scenes, if you can call them that, were off. And I think that was another factor, right? So the missing emotional impact, I agree. There's no gut punch there. There's no like soaring joy either. I didn't really feel a whole lot while watching this movie. I did feel bad for Jim at times. I did feel badly for a lot of the characters, but that's about as far as it went. So pity mainly was like the main emotion. That was also offset by the fact that anything that was supposed to be menacing just came off really flat. There's a part where Basie is supposed to be getting like the shit kicked out of him by Sergeant Nagata. And I thought, idiot Gene here, I'm watching the movie. I'm like, wow, Basie's like really swift and he's dodging Nagata's like punches and knees. He's like, whoosh, whoosh. Like, go John Malkovich, you know? And then I realized, oh, no. He's actually supposed to be getting hit because you hear like the, oh, okay, he's getting hit. John Malkovich is just really bad at fight choreography. But again, the explosions looked incredible. The P-51s look beautiful. And that is actually the mascot of my JROTC unit. The P-51 Mustang, but Cadillac of the sky. Mm-hmm. But no, I you're absolutely right. The emotion was lacking there. And that's the thing is they've got 2.5 fucking hours to make us get attached to these characters, to understand what they're going through and all that stuff. And it's not like there was a lack of manipulation, like they were trying to tell the story from a strictly journalistic perspective and just give you the facts. It wasn't that either. There was an attempt at emotional manipulation that did not work.
No, and again, these pilots, these Mustang pilots, they're shooting individual soldiers in strafing runs. The pilots are so aware of their situation that they can fly by the tower at probably like 200-300 miles an hour, see young Jim, identify that he's a British child, and give him the old thumbs up and the smile as he flies by. And Jim is screaming, and it's just, I can feel Spielberg. He's putting the pieces together, Gene. And you think the movies at work like Saving Private Ryan and the scene of storming Normandy, or the way that he conveys this juxtaposition, whether it's when you have Carpazzo and they go into that French village and there's a sniper and the side of the building's blown off and the family's there and he's looking at the girl up in this normal apartment. He's saying, she reminds me of my niece. And he tries to get her, and you're seeing the family dynamic, a ripped open building, a sniper, and blood in the streets. That's the refined mission. You see where it's going to go. Here, he kept doing it. Okay, we're going to show this visual juxtaposition, and we're going to do it every chance we can get. We're going to show that there's loss of innocence. We're going to show this childhood fantasy. He's flying around with his planes, and then the real ones fly over with the reality of war. And I'm just like, I get it, man. Jim loves planes, right? Okay, that he's going to learn the destruction that they cause. Oh, Jim's life of opulence and wealth in Shanghai to now life in the camp. Okay, the healthy American prisoners, and now the Japanese soldiers are starting to suffer. And we see it. He keeps showing it. And he's got items that he keeps showing. They keep focusing on the items that meant something in a normal world. Those golf shoes. We see it originating with the one British prisoner who gets put on the back of the truck to go to the camp. He dies. Jim inherits them. And they keep showing it to us. And then we're going to do this long death march. And we end up in the football stadium that is being used as an open air storage for all of the luxurious items that they have raided. I can imagine, Gene, because this is 1945. We've jumped ahead a couple years. All of these items are sitting out in the element, like sofas, fine china, hutches, wood jewelry, crystal chandeliers. This scene serves nothing else other than being like, oh, look at all these items which people care about of luxury and look what they're worth now. They would kill each other for a can of beans or a can of fucking water or a Hershey bar. They hold no value here. I get it, man. I get it. Well, that's the sole reason for that trip to the football stadium, because Spielberg's like, this is going to hit them. They're going to see that everything they care about, that they're chasing their dreams, it means nothing in the end. Fucking yes, we get it, Spielberg. Just tone it down.
They did like each of these things once, Big D. They're trying to tell a story.
Once we saw those damn shoes.
It's not like they went back to the football stadium over and over again.
Oh, what about the metaphorical, his little suitcase? His suitcase, Gene, that represented childhood.
Man, you're so jaded. Let's talk about the suitcase, okay? I thought that was a beautiful touch in this film.
Shut up.
There's this photograph that Jim carries around with him everywhere. When he goes from the British dorms into the American dorms, then when he goes back from the American dorms to the British dorms, every time he moves, this photo gets pinned to the wall. And it's clearly not Jim's parents. He doesn't have a picture of his parents with him. They don't look like his parents. And I couldn't figure out who the couple was in the photo. I was like, oh, maybe it's his grandparents. Maybe it's, I don't know, British royalty or celebrities. And then I realized it was just a photo of parents. It was just two random parents that were from Life magazine, right? Because Jim didn't have a photograph of his parents. So this couple that's just clipped out of a magazine served as his picture of mom and dad. That's a beautiful touch, man. Like, it didn't need a voiceover. It didn't need an explanation. It didn't need clunky dialogue to explain. You didn't find that touching in the least?
Gene, his fucking suitcase was a metaphor for all of the individual moments along his journey and growth and his life experiences. And he collects them all. It could be maybe a magazine. Uh-huh. It could be a bar of soap. It could be maybe a rock or a marble. Uh-huh. And he collects them all and he carries them around him against all, like, just common thought. Why would I risk carrying this heavy suitcase? I'm a young boy. Until he hits the point where, Gene, he no longer needs them. He's outgrown all of these little trinkets which represent his journey. And he fucking throws it in the water, Gene, and where does it end up? Right back in Shanghai where we started. No, It was heavy-handed. It was ridiculous. And again, what happened to marauding and people stealing? And this kid was doing quite well for a 12-year-old. If I see a 12-year-old with a suitcase packed with all this shit, the kid won't have a suitcase for too long.
What, you want his Life magazine photo and a marble?
I could trade that with that one woman for sex. Of course I could.
What? This is a great picture of some parents. Let's fuck.
Listen, everything. No. Everything has value. Everything has value to somebody else. You just have to figure out what it is. You look at the trades they did with the bar of soap would get you a needle. The needle became a compass. It's all in the effort of surviving and getting further down the road. This 12-year-old kid with his chest of memories is not making it too far in the death march without somebody ripping that open and saying, kid, what do you got in the suitcase?
God, you're jaded, man.
I'm hardened, Gene.
Coldness of Florida is already taking over. It's sort of setting in your veins. You're one of them now.
That's right. I'm a survivor, Gene.
You're a survivor.
I'm going to survive this. This shall pass.
Well, Jim wanders back to the Shuju camp. Along the way, he hears news of Japan's surrender and the war's end. He's reunited with the now disillusioned Japanese teenager who remembers Jim and offers him a mango, drawing his sword to cut it. Basie appears with a group of armed Americans to loot the Red Cross containers being airdropped over the area. One of the Americans, thinking Jim is in danger, shoots and kills the Japanese youth. Basie offers to help Jim find his parents, but Jim, infuriated over his friend's death, chooses to stay behind. He is found by American soldiers and placed in an orphanage where he is reunited with his mother and father, though he does not recognize them at first. So Big D, this character who goes unnamed in the film, the young Japanese pilot, we see him throughout over the fence line, and he and Jim sort of befriend each other at arm's distance. Did you get the impression that that teenage kamikaze pilot was developmentally disabled?
No. I thought that I thought Dainty was mentally challenged, but not him.
Okay, because I went down like this entire rabbit hole. I was like, oh my God, as I did not know about the Japanese in China, I also didn't know that the kamikaze pilots were like special needs kids.
No,
I thought that's what it was. He kind of acts and looks like a little less intellectually capable than the other Japanese around him. No,
well, I think at this point, right? You think of your list of kamikaze draft, right?
Yeah.
You're going to pick the ultra patriotic who are like decent pilots.
Sure.
Down at the bottom are the kids that you have to teach to fly in a chair simulator with a broomstick.
Yeah.
It looked like you and your cousins playing Top Gun, where you had one would be a co-pilot in the back and you would double up the kitchen chairs. I don't think this kid was special needs, but I don't think he was the optimal pilot.
Yeah. How do you explain the whole mango scene? Hey, there's Americans on base shooting guns at people. I should get my sword out and chop this mango.
No, also, Gene, the fact is he did not, I don't think he really wanted to be a kamikaze pilot. He hit the jackpot. His plane's broken.
Yeah.
Instead, he's racked with guilt.
To be the best.
He's bent over. What am I going to do? I would have been like, oh, shoot, shucks, my plane doesn't work. And I would run away. I would get out of there. But there is something really sad. It was poignant because the ceremony starts out when they're having the kamikaze pilots. And they have a nice white tablecloth, and all the officers are dressed in their dress uniforms, and they look pressed and clean. And you can see it's a moment where it's pride. You know that the kamikaze pilots, they're doing their ceremonial shot, and they're giving their life for Japan, for country. And then by the time that your special needs pilot comes in, it is a dirty tablecloth. There's only two other officers. He's the only pilot. It's sad. You can see how far the formality has fallen. And yeah, that was emotional because at this point it's fallen apart. And even till the end, the Japanese were fairly good to the prisoners.
I'm glad that some degree of symbolism broke through to you, Big D. You weren't too jaded for at least this point to get through to you where you're like, oh, that was nice. That made sense.
Jim is either full of shit, the lies that he tells this whole thing where he's like, oh, I'm writing a book on bridges and I'm going to go build a kite that can fly a man. He's saying all this weird shit. And he always seems to be in every possible historical moment on the battlefield. The atomic bomb, he just happens to be looking at that at that moment. It's a white light. It's like God was taking a picture. I'm like, all right, slow down, Jim. And then Jim also has this belief that he can bring people back to life. And he starts giving the other pilot the chest compressions. And he's like, I can bring him back. I can bring him back. No, Jim, you can't bring him back. He's a little weird kid. Yeah, he's been through a hard time. But his lies and delusions started way back. Maybe he needed this whole situation to get his shit right.
He's like the Forrest Gump of World War II.
He is. I'm surprised he wasn't there. Like somehow he stumbled upon like the battlefield where they were signing, or the aircraft carrier where they were signing he gets rescued. He ends up on the American aircraft carrier where they're signing the documents which end the war and the surrender. He just seems to be in every place possible around the war. Hey, the Japanese troops are invading Shanghai, happens to be there. The bombing rate happens to be there. The bomb going off happens to be there. He's, as far as the acting performance, I thought he was good. I thought he was a credible, like, kid actor. Normally, the children actors are playing kid roles. This, he demonstrates a natural ability. It led him to a long career. And I don't know. I started thinking about, we always hear the stories, the horror stories of Hollywood stars or kid actors who go off the rails. Who their life falls apart afterwards. But he is in a string of like successful child actors who managed to transition. This was 87. He was 12. Jodie Foster, a little earlier. Child actor, acclaimed multi-Academy Awards after that. Leonardo DiCaprio, child actor, very successful even to now. Natalie Portman, Drew Barrymore, Ryan Gosling, Kirsten Dunst. You got the Interview with a Vampire. She's now an adult actor, very successful. I wonder, Gene, if you were a parent, if you and Sarah had a young child who really gravitated towards acting and said, Dad, I know you have some connections out in Hollywood. You have somebody who can get me in the door. And they actually liked it. They wanted to be an actor because we can see Christian Bale. He's got a natural drive to it. And little Christian Bale is just like adult Christian Bale. He's intense. He's a method actor. Would you steer your child away, even if it was their passion? You're not the hovering helicopter Hollywood parent who's driving their kids, the Britney Spears, those trying to get the money. Would you steer them away from it just because you want to try to protect them?
I don't particularly like actors, but if that's what the kid wanted to do and he got a major role in a major film at age 12, like, okay, clearly you're pretty good at this, little Christian Bale. Like, go for it. I would just want to be sure that the child understands that gigs are subjective. And that's one of the things that's so terrifying. I mean, you and I, we hold down our day jobs. We don't just podcast. And part of the reason is I would not want to pin my welfare, my security to whether or not people like the thing I'm doing, because people can shut this podcast off because I don't like Gene's opinions or his voice, or I don't like the way Big D pronounces words. Whatever the fact is, they can just turn away from you. And there's plenty of actors where people swear they're incredibly talented and I think they're just absolutely trash, and other actors that I think are fantastic, like Joey Pants, that other people don't really get. So that would be the one thing, is to say, hey kid, listen, the well can run dry after one movie, or you never get a role in a movie. And as long as you give them some other sense of worth, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's like football. I don't know if I had a son, if I would want him to play football super young. You try to protect them from what they don't know. But Jim, as the character goes,
yeah,
this is a pretty traumatic experience, but I think he's learned some valuable life lessons. I think he'll be in a pretty good place.
I mean, yeah, other than the trauma, yeah, it's going to be fine.
Well, I mean, he learned to survive. He learned to survive and overcome, and he didn't need his parents there to save him. So nothing really bad happened to him. He wasn't victimized. He wasn't abused.
Right.
He wasn't sexually assaulted. Nothing. It could have all gone wrong if some of the Shanghai, the underworld had decided to purchase that young boy. I think it would have been a much worse experience.
I mean, he was abandoned by his only friends, and then the one friend that he did manage to make got shot and killed in front of him. So other than that, though, he's fine.
Yeah.
Probably had dysentery and typhoid and all kinds of ass worms.
Dude, again, fucking Forrest Gump. Was he a magnet for all those airdrops? Those canisters of goodies? He just walked and he'd be in a building, Gene, and it would come through the roof and it would land right next to him.
Red Cross ain't what it used to be, man. Red Cross, they would carpet bomb your ass with Spam and condensed milk.
I picture them up there in the sights. I see a small child, a small British child. More packages, more Hershey's.
Sir, there's thousands of Japanese just a kilometer to the right. Fuck them.
No.
That's a young British boy.
He needs a Hershey.
Jim.
It's Jim. The other people in the camp were mocking him about Hershey bars. Load the double the Hershey bars. We need that boy to find one.
Cue the music. Well, now is the time in the podcast where we give our Shat score for Empire of the Sun. Shat scores are we're telling you how many wipes this movie would take to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It's cans of Spam falling from the sky. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster movie. It's no mama, no papa, no whiskey sodas. I'll go first. Big D, you sold this movie to me as an epic coming-of-age film, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like Empire of the Sun must be considered in a very specific niche genre to be appreciated. I would not call this a wartime drama. I would call this a literary film, and it has to be digested as such. Literary films, to me, they are bound by different criteria. They should have the feeling of a book. And in a book, things just are presented differently. They unfold at the pace of literature, aka really fucking slowly. And they require the audience to draw inferences and get really into some uncomfortable truths about humans, right? Like seeing something like a kid watching two adults have sex. That is a reality. If you are a boy and you are in the room while there's another couple having sex, that couple is going to have the sex because life is short and you're in a fucking internment camp. And the kid is going to watch. And that is just, it's like the sex scene in Enemy at the Gates where it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, it's uncomfortable, but it's true. Good guys aren't perfect. Sometimes groveling is the bravest thing you can do, right? It's an act of selflessness. It's an act of sacrifice. The hero doesn't have to win. The hero just has to sometimes survive. And there are good movies in this genre. Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? It feels like a book. It feels like a novel. It feels like classic literature. And there are bad ones too, one of which John Malkovich was in, Of Mice and Men, which we've covered on this podcast. Yeah. Also, 1995's Notes from Underground took my favorite book of all time and made a god-awful film. Do not watch it. I think this is a good one. I would go 1.5 wipes for Empire of the Sun.
Before I get to my score, Gene, I have to ask you, now that you're a married man, you and Sarah are in a camp for 2 or 3 years. Sarah's teeth are starting to get a bit soft. She's malnourished. She's looking like she's suffering. Mm-hmm. You're in a bunkhouse. It's sweaty. It's sticky. There's insects. There's a child 5 feet away. Would you climb on top of Sarah?
No.
I would never even imagine doing that. I think it would be so wrong. You know she doesn't want it. You know she's doing it out of guilt. It's a horrible, horrible situation.
Did you get the impression that Mrs. Victor didn't want it?
I think he was wrong for asking. No, she didn't want it. Nobody would want it in that situation.
I think I go overboard in the other direction, though, where I'm like, if Sarah's like, oh, man, we had some chili. My stomach's a little upset. I'm like, well, not having sex tonight.
Right. That's respect.
Hey, yeah, I see your stomach's upset. Want to bang?
No.
I think you'd be surprised, though. People often are like if the roles are reversed and I had gas and she said, want to have sex? Yes, I still want to have sex, even with gas.
But wait, she didn't even have the strength to pick up her plate with her potato.
Right.
I don't think she was lusting after this sweaty dude who failed to get her an extra potato climbing on top of her.
But maybe she was like, Charles, my love, as one last dying wish, I want you to.
Oh, that was a proper shot.
Put it in the pooper.
That was not. That was quite pathetic.
For country and for king.
Oh, no, that was. I felt bad for her. That was. Ugh. That was. Ugh. And again,
so what's your wife's score?
Man, it's a Spielberg movie. It's beautiful. Is it the epic that I remember it? No. And I like another movie, Gene, that I'd probably recommend to you is Far and Away, the Tom Cruise telling of the expansion west of the United States. That is one of those other epic films that I bet you does not hold up, of them migrating to the United States and then they're going out to the land grab out west. And it's a good film. It's Spielberg trying the beginning. And who am I to talk down to the master, Steven Spielberg? This film, I think it's 1.75. It just didn't connect. It felt long. They could have told the story in probably about 30 minutes less and made me care more about the characters. It was, and it's not about showing what they go through, because there's other films that just go through the mundane daily lives of people on a journey, and it didn't connect emotionally to me the way that the visuals did. And whatever, it was fun because I always remember like the young little Christian Bale serenading the kamikaze pilots in front of all the Americans and the Brits, and he's singing in his beautiful choir voice. But that's about as much as I remembered. So I'm sorry that well, actually, I'm not sorry, because you said you kind of liked it.
Yeah.
But for me, long-winded story. 1.75 wipes, probably the worst Spielberg movie that we're going to review, other than maybe Batteries Not Included.
All right, with 1.75 wipes from Big D and 1.5 wipes from me, that gives us an average wipe score of 1.625 wipes for Empire of the Sun.
So, Gene, with that score, that now ties us in the 126 spot with Return to Oz. Slightly better than Gremlins, War Games, and The Natural. Slightly worse than Risky Business, Leon, Clue, or Bloodsport.
I think it did pretty well for itself. Considering how much criticism we had of this film, it scored pretty well.
I mean, considering it didn't make back its budget,
yeah.
But cast was great. I mean, that's
the thing, right? It's like in a sobering time like 2024, I could see this movie being somewhat appealing. Can you imagine this movie coming out in 87? Everyone's just feeling pretty good. You know, it's the 80s. You got all these great movies coming out in 84, 85. And then, this actually came out the same year as The Last Emperor. So maybe, that one probably didn't do too well either.
Yeah, no, hold on. I looked this up. Just hold on. No, you're talking about like when this came out, Gene. Do you know what other movies came out on this day with this?
Urban Cowboy.
You're going to the theater with your family and you're like, do we want to see a theatrical, like a historical drama about an internment camp? Or let's go see Three Men and a Baby. Yeah, that sounds like a good one.
Yeah, Three Men and a Baby.
Or let's go see Throw Mama from the Train.
No, that movie sucked.
But I'm saying, back in the day, Billy Crystal. Yeah. How about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? All came out on this day.
Yeah, it's a much better film.
Back in 87, as well as the theatrical release of Eddie Murphy Raw.
Holy Christ, this came out like during the holiday season.
Yeah, December of 87. Yeah, December 8th. Yeah, nothing screams holiday like Eddie Murphy Raw.
Great timing.
Yeah, great timing.
All right, Jeff. Well, thank you for exposing me to Empire of the Sun, and thank you for taking Big D back to think about his choices. Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week's another expedition into the 2000s, thanks to our great listener, Steve W. Struggling musician Peter is best known as the boyfriend of TV star Sarah Marshall. After she unceremoniously dumps him, he feels lost and alone, but makes a last-ditch bid to get over it by going to Hawaii. However, she and her new boyfriend are there at the same hotel. Commissioned by Steve W., came out in 2008. And my memories of this, again, were positive, but after today, who knows?
And just before recording this episode, we received some very sad news that Hot Sauce Steve's father had passed. So, Steve, we're thinking of you tonight as we record this. And I know you took some comfort as we released Zoolander, and that helped you kind of get through the week. So I hope this will be a second dose of a little bit of joy. I know these things are never easy, but we're so glad to have you in the Shat family and hope that we can help in the slightest way with your loss.
Yeah, Steve, sorry very much for your loss. And like we had just talked about, with the election and everything, and it's I struggle with this a lot because my father and I differ in our beliefs, and I really had a hard time, just him and I on different pages. And I called you to talk about it and said, I don't ever want there to be a day that I look back and regret not spending time with him because of shit that doesn't matter between us. So spend time with the ones you love. And Steve, sorry for your loss. And hopefully in any small way we can help you feel normal. But your dad did a good job because you are a good human being. And thank you for being part of our families.
Well, that concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Email us, hosts@shatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next time for the following movie.
Hey, you got here fast. I got a surprise for you.
Peter, as you know, I love you.
Are you breaking up with me?
Pete, are you, We're leading different lives. It's like you're standing on the dock and I'm in the lake.
Sarah, I swear to God, I'll jump in the lake like a merman.
Do you want to put some clothes on?
Would you like to pick out the outfit that you break up with me in?
Sexy crime fighter Sarah Marshall's been spotted cozying up to singer and notorious Lothario Aldous Snow.
She's dating somebody. And until I do the same thing, I'm gonna feel like I want to die.
Hi.
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 Do you mind not saying that?
Do you want to gag me?
Kind of now. I had sex with this woman who I barely even know. I'm really scared that I have an STD, Doc.
Peter, I'm a pediatrician. Have you noticed you're sitting on a fire truck?
Everywhere I look, I'm reminded of her.
Why don't you go on a vacation?
I could go to Hawaii.
Welcome to Turtle Bay and enjoy your stay. Peter, what are you doing here?
Came here to murder you.
This is a disaster. Go someplace else. I'm not leaving here. It'll look like I'm running away. Wait, why are you whispering? You're not following them, are you? Get out of there.
Peter.
You okay?
Got hurt, but I know Sarah, and I'm pretty sure I just ruined her day. I'd like to grab some dinner, please.
Is your girlfriend joining you?
No.
You just by yourself?
Yeah.
Do you want like a magazine or something? It's gonna be boring. I just would be so depressed.
Wait. Why don't you come over and sit with us?
Did you see her boyfriend? He is ridiculous.
I like her hair. I wonder if the carpet matches her pubes.
This spring,
Get out of your head. It's really nice out here.
Are you gonna jump or what? Come on, Peter, I can see your vagina from here.
I'll jump.
Universal Pictures presents
My homie over here on this honeymoon. Are you giving to a hard and rough?
The wife wants me to do certain things.
No.
God would not put a playground next to a sewage system.
a comedy about getting left behind.
You need to get back on that board.
Oh, wow, you got coral on your leg.
Can you get out of my leg, please, hotel man?
You sound like you're from London.
And coming out ahead.
I think it's good you're getting out there.
I think you need to move just a tiny bit further away from the microphone. No, closer.
Oh.
Now a little further.
Okay.
Closer.
And then...
Oh, I know what you're doing. You stop that.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
That's a great necklace, Liz. Did you have that a second ago?
Oh, that's gross.
That's a wrap, baby.
That's a wrap.